virtuous viewers, and thank you for joining us on today's Our Noble Lineage here on Supreme Master Television. On the second of our two-part program, we again have the pleasure of speaking with Dr. Holly Roberts, a medical doctor, a mother of 3 daughters, and author of 10 books, who is also a vegetarian. In her quest to help people towards health, Dr. Roberts sought to understand the values that motivate people in their life choices. And she thus embarked upon the study of world religions and philosophy. In addition to her medical degree, she obtained her master's in theology and her PhD in Asian religion and philosophy. Dr. Roberts' master's thesis in theology eventually turned into her second book, Vegetarian Christian Saints.
You asked me about vegetarian Christian saints. Now, I realized as a physician, it's very difficult to inspire people and very hard to change their way of thinking just by telling them medical facts, why they should be vegetarian. And because I do feel being vegetarian is a spiritual path. Yeah. And so I wanted to write about, this is a predominantly Christian country, and so I wanted to reach everybody and let them know, so many people of Christian faith feel, being vegetarian is for Buddhists or for Hindus. I wanted to let them know, no, it is for Christian. It is in the roots of Christianity. So I needed to build a foundation of knowledge myself. So I began my master's in Christian theology to really just learn so many facts about the roots of Christianity. And for my thesis, I wrote about vegetarian Christian saints.
In her thorough study of the early Christian saints, Dr. Roberts discovered that these compassionate individuals led their lives as compassionate vegetarians. This was a fact that, as she explains, became obscured.
Now, in my book, I wrote about 150 saints that the church had considered pillars of the symbols that Jesus Christ represents. And I want to say that even though I only wrote about 150, I'm sure there was so many more. But you see, there was no word vegetarian in those days. This word vegetarian is very recent. I had to read through and find 2 passages about each of these saints. One was that never would he or she take the life of any being, and never would his or her lips touch flesh.
Yeah,
and that was it. Those were vegetarians.
That's a strong evidence.
Strong evidence. And these were spiritual vegetarians. You see, back in these days, over the 2,000 years of the church, nobody knew about vitamins or cholesterol.
No.
But all of these people were vegetarian for very spiritual reasons.
Yes.
And they would not harm the life of any being. And then when I read about them, I realized, well, you see, the church went through different phases of the criteria for people to be canonized. And sometimes they canonized people who were martyrs, who had to die for Christianity. But most of the time, and in the beginning of the church, they found these people who were ascetics, who just wanted to live the simplest of lives and meditate and not take the life of any being and not harm the planet. And this was way before they knew about global warming, but they realized just to living the simplest of lives was the highest. They didn't want materialism.
In her extensive research, Dr. Roberts discovered that some of the best loved and most revered saints were vegetarians.
And then there were other people who were canonized who were mystics, like everyone knows of St. Francis of Assisi. Well, there were a number of other mystics who were vegetarian, who really reached these high spiritual levels, and they knew they should not harm any being. And then there were others who just lived in compassionate kindness. And one who I think is very important is St. Jean-Marie Vianney, and he is so important because he is the patron saint of parochial schools. And all these children who have gone to parochial schools, they don't know that the man, the pillar of parochial schools, he wouldn't harm any being. He wouldn't step on a worm. And so these were people, really the pillars of early Christianity. And they were vegetarian. They would just not harm any being, any creature.
Dr. Roberts shared more about Christianity's compassionate roots that embraced respect for all forms of life and the effect such knowledge had on her personally.
All of the initial orders of these people who really wanted to follow Christianity and live as monks and out in the desert and really spread Christianity, they all began with vegetarian roots. The Benedictine orders, the Dominican orders, all of them. And these people sacrificed so much, just to not harm any beings. Yes. And so I want to make sure I don't have any mistakes in this book. So I had my book reviewed by a Cistercian nun, a cloistered nun. And after I got back all of her input about the book, because she wanted to give me more insight into what it was like to live as a cloistered individual in a religious order. And so I read through her editing and then my husband's editing, and we sat together and read through the lives of each of these saints. And we sat there crying because these people were so highly evolved and spiritual, and so much of their message has been lost, and we sat there crying.
Dr. Roberts also shared her insight into the account of Jesus cleansing the temple in Jerusalem, as described in the New Testament.
Now, he went with his followers to Jerusalem, as is a blessing for Jews on Passover, but this had been a time, Passover, when people believed in the slaughter of animals. Now, if you go back to any ancient religion, if you look at Hinduism and Judaism, like 5,000-year-old religions, they believe that in part of their evolution from ancient people who slaughtered humans, go to the slaughter of other animals. And on Passover, there was unfortunately massive slaughter of these animals, of sheep and cows, and for the poorer people, the pigeons, the doves. And so Jesus went there, Passover, and he knew this would be his last act. And he went there and opened the cages and let out the animals. He let out the animals and he let out the doves, and he turned over the tables of the money changers. Now, so many people, they take this to mean that he didn't like that money was being changed in the temple, but it wasn't being changed inside the holiest of holy spot. This was where the Romans said the Jews should change money. Who knew what their money was worth? And so it went to the highest bidder. There was no foreign exchange policy. And so, of course, people would only give their sheep that they had bred to the highest bidder. And, so I'm sure there was a lot of arguing. But I think the really important thing was Jesus said, you have changed God's house into a den of thieves. Now, what can you steal more than life? What can you steal more than an animal's life or a thief's life or a dove's life? A man of his level, I don't think he thought about money. I think he thought about the loss of lives. And I think that's the only thing that was important to him. So I think Jesus at that time, his heart had to go out to the sacrifice of these animals. And if you take it one step further, sacrificing an animal's life when you don't need to. This is all sacrifice of these innocent beasts when it is known that we do not need to eat any animals, to take the life of any animals to live and to eat.
In closing, Dr. Roberts reveals why Mahatma Gandhi is such an inspirational person in her own life.
And he said he would always be a Hindu his whole life, but he read profusely of the other faiths and of Christianity and Judaism and Islam and Buddhism. And he said he thought each of us should try to read all of the other faiths, take the highest values, the highest form of living from each faith, melt that into our own faith and then be the highest form, the highest person we can be within our own faith, and live it to the highest level of nonviolence, compassion, and simple living. Now, if we look today, you can live simply as a vegetarian and taking so much less of the earth and so much less of the water living as a vegetarian. We all know nowadays that people who consume a meat-based diet, it takes so much more land and causes so much more pollution and so much more water to feed an animal and then secondarily feed a human being. And Gandhi recognized this years back, that if you live in non-abundance and live on a plant-based diet, you are doing the best to protect this planet as you possibly can.
The gracious Dr. Holly Roberts conveyed her appreciation and sent a message to Supreme Master Ching Hai.
I want to thank you all. I want to thank your group for letting me talk on your show. I think you're a wonderful group. I hope that your messages of nonviolent living and compassion and peace, I hope they spread far and wide. And I'm so thankful you came to me and I was able to find out about your wonderful group and your Supreme Master, and just blessings to all of you.
Thank you, Dr. Roberts, and our profound gratitude for your time and all your dedication to bring the veg message to the forefront of society and spirituality. Blessed be your noble endeavors to uplift our world to a kinder place. Please visit www.angelipress.com for more information about Dr. Holly Roberts and her 10 books, which include Your Vegetarian Pregnancy, Vegetarian Christian Saints, The Vegetarian Philosophy of India, Doctrine of Inner Peace, and The Health of Merciful Living. Dr. Holly Roberts' books can also be purchased on Amazon.com and BN.com. Faithful viewers, we have enjoyed your company on today's program. Coming up on Supreme Master Television is Between Master and Disciples. May your days be brightened with the loving smiles of all those you meet.
For more details, please visit www.suprememastertv.com/NL.